Yep.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is Sunday, but not just any Sunday. It's the Sunday of the week that we found out that DEI is destroying everything. I mean, I should deem myself lucky that here I am, 5'3" and smart, and I still have a job. How is that even possible?
You know, I just want to. I'm sorry. I just want to say that I'm happy as a cannabis consumer to see that people are finally starting to realize that the DEA is destroying this country.
Let's change the A to an I. We'll discuss that later on.
Wait, what?
One more thing.
What's the I? I don't get it.
Drug enforcement industry.
The drug enforcement industry. Sorry to interrupt you, Gary. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Just go ahead and roll the credits.
Yeah, fuck it.
It's all alphabet soup, you know, at the end of it. But it's been a crazy week, and I have no idea what next week is going to hold. So let's just go ahead and live today like there's going to be no tomorrow. I guess that's all we could possibly do. Here I am. I am Gary Stein, your political director of Suncoast NORML here, and master of public health. Yeah, that's my applause. As sick as that sounded. And below me here is our deputy director and master of business administration, Carlos Jose Angel Hermida.
Hello, everybody. Yo soy tu papá. Thank you.
He's nice. Cuban, and that's the extent of his Spanish. And to my right, your left, is our executive director coming to us from Anne Arundel County in Maryland, just above the Beltway, where he hits him below the Beltway, Christopher Cano. Hey, Chris, you've been in D.C., and hell froze over, I guess, 2 weeks ago. Has it thawed yet?
No, it is getting colder, which is why I'm wearing this big hoodie right now.
You do have heat in the house, right?
Of course, but it is cold outside. The water is frozen. We're in week 2 of a new administration, and things are just an absolute shit show in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, yesterday the Democratic Party elected a new chairman, and he made the comment that we're going to only take money from the good billionaires, and the bad billionaires are not going to take their money. And I'm just like, what? There's such thing as a good billionaire? Okay.
I was actually hoping for the guy from Wisconsin to get the job, not him, but that's besides the point. And coming to us just below Chris is our friend from High Times and Celeb Stoners, Steve Bloom. How are things in New York City today?
It's pretty chilly up here today. It's about 20 degrees. So maybe even a little snow tonight. It's definitely been a cold winter, to say the least, by comparison to the last 5 years. We got a little snow, but not too much, you know, so we still don't get packed in with a lot of snow. 3 or 4 inches is a lot these days, you know, as opposed to any kind of blizzards. But, you know, things have changed.
Yeah,
that's what she said.
That's one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because you've been a journalist for many years, and you've been a journalist in not only in the music industry, but also in the cannabis industry. Have you ever been accused of being a journalist?
Accused
in a bad way?
No, I mean, listen, people take shots at media, and I always defend media, you know, since I'm media. So I don't really, you know, accept too many criticisms of media. You know, they say media this, media bad, whatever. I just feel we're part of it. We're just delivering the news, and take it as you want. So no, I don't mind being accused of being a journalist. That's a good thing.
You know, Steve, the interesting thing is oftentimes we've seen gonzo journalists, folks in music and entertainment, oftentimes have more integrity than some of these mainstream folks. I mean, the days of the Cronkites, you know, and people trusting the news seems to be past, and that's kind of sad in a lot of ways.
Well, that's because of Trump. You know, honestly, fake news and all that kind of stuff. He's put the media in the target, and people buy it. You know, I don't even like the term fake news. I'm offended when anybody uses it, because that means they bought into Trump's way of thinking about media. Shouldn't even use that term. Just that term is a bad term. It's like It's like an obscenity.
Well, supposedly there is a difference between a journalist and a reporter. A journalist being somebody who writes down their thoughts on a regular basis and puts things together, whereas a reporter is somebody who reports the news as it happens. Is that,
I don't know.
the basic idea of it?
You're splitting hairs. Honestly, I mean, I'm both. I'm also an editor. I'm an author. I'm a publisher. I wear a lot of hats. I'm an event director. So, put a lot of names on it, but I don't see the distinction too much. I mean, I understand how you clarified that, but it's still about the same.
How about an editorialist versus a reporter?
Well, I mean, I guess an editorialist is supposed to have an opinion versus a reporter's not. But things have changed over time. Look at the way things are reported these days. A lot of first-person stuff in mainstream media. They never would have allowed that when I was younger. I mean, it was very strict when I was coming up. You never put yourself in the story. Hunter Thompson and people like that put themselves in the story, and that kind of changed things. Developed this style of what's known as new journalism.
Yeah, we need more gonzo journalism nowadays, I think. Just because people often portray editorial as news. It is not always the case. That's where you get the news, I think.
Well, for me,
people express their opinions as news.
Well, for me, having worked at High Times, that changed the dynamic in my mind in terms of what you do as a reporter. Because our job was not to be objective. Our job was to be activist journalists, and it was great to have that, be able to wear that hat. So you didn't have to call the DEA and get a quote. It's like, who cares what they say? It's going to be negative.
So for
we're going to get into the DA in just a moment, but I wanted to get back into history for just a little bit and ask if ever High Times actually did move the needle as far as being an activist and actually making a change just from being able to report on a particular situation.
What's the question?
Did High Times ever have a chance to actually change history, so to speak? To just bend the needle towards one direction or the other by being an activist?
You got to give High Times some credit, like NORML. I mean, High Times and NORML really teamed up to change the laws. NORML was the activist organization. High Times was the media front for it. Working very closely together to change people's perceptions about marijuana, cannabis, call it what you want. So no, I think people give me some credit for all the work I did at High Times, that I helped change the laws just by participating in the effort to do that. I'm not the first guy or the last guy or the guy in the middle. I'm just one of many people who participated in this. On the media side, though, it gave us a little more power. And also at that time, there really wasn't a lot of competition. So High Times really had people's ears and eyes. They didn't have any place else really to turn. The stoners just went to High Times. There was, Cannabis Culture and a few other magazines came later, but High Times was there for the duration. And, fortunately, it's kind of faded from view these days, but, we're there, during those important years when, when I got there in 88, 89, that was pretty, this is like still in the middle of the Republican era of Reagan and Bush, and High Times barely survived that era of 12 years. It's kind of amazing that they did. But by the 90s, with Clinton coming in and the Democrats taking over, that gave a new kind of lift to the whole legalization movement. And High Times kind of peaked again, had another, rally after like a great early 70s, a bad 80s, a really good 90s, and then things started to kind of go downhill again in the 2000s, after 9/11.
Well, I got most of my news when I was in high school from High Times, National Lampoon, and Rolling Stone. I found that those were the three most important journalistic apparatuses out there.
Well, I would add to that, say, New Times and the Village Voice. The papers that really influenced me to be a journalist were the ones you just mentioned, and the Village Voice growing up in New York, which was so significant. And New Times is sort of forgotten, but that was really a great magazine in the 70s.
That kind of leads me to my question, right? I understand that you're the publisher with Celeb Stoner, but in this day and age, like I don't feel like we have a lot of mainstream media that like we can go to as people who like represent this alternative culture. What do you suggest for somebody that's like out there trying to find facts, trying to get informed? Like how do you navigate this world of media today?
Do your own searching and figure it out yourself. Essentially, there's, but I mean, we're taking steps backwards. I read an article in The Atlantic yesterday. There was an article in the New York Times a week ago. They're all kind of negative. They're all playing up the potency and illnesses and cannabis abuse syndrome nonsense, and it's just, we're sort of in another round of this reefer madness, because with legalization comes, the effort to kind of turn it back. I mean,
well, we always hear the
in Ohio, for instance, they're trying to like rewrite the laws around legalization. They want to change it all. The legislature wants to kind of, they don't want to kick it out the door, but they just really want to limit it majorly. And they want to build in, potency taxes and all kinds of stuff. The whole potency issue is just off the rails. All the Republicans, that's their big issue now. If they're going to support legalization, well, it has to be, at a low, THC level or whatever. It's like, honestly, I'm trying to figure that out and say, well, you want to drink a high proof alcohol, pay a little more for it. You want to, take a, have a high proof, or high potency marijuana, maybe pay a little bit more for it, but ban it.
Well, I actually was having fun with the legislature not too long ago, who was telling me that the THC level is paramount in order to regulate it properly to evoke safety. I said, well, thank God you're not looking at the THCV, because then we'd really be in trouble. He said, THC what?
Yeah, right.
No, I mean, what, you're not paying attention to THCV? Why not?
A very famous, person that was involved with NORML, Dr. Lester Grinspoon, he once said, and I always hold to this, is that the beauty of high potency weed is you need to smoke less. So, you just, it hits you faster, and, and you just, maybe take one hit instead of two or whatever. If you think smoking is bad for you, maybe it's better that you do less. But I just, that's my argument. I just, people make their own decisions, and, I don't see the damage that's happening from cannabis that they want you to think is happening.
No, and the paternalist argument. What about the kids? Oh, the kids. That's the argument we hear across. I work in multiple states. It's not just Florida. We hear the same bullshit that we're hearing out of red Florida, out of blue Maryland. Oh, what about the kids? And the kids are fine. Legalization has caused teen use rates to plummet. It's just ludicrous to still hear those arguments.
Yeah, it's pressing buttons, these nerves that always kind of sort of work. So, bring up the kids, bring up potency, bring up, now we have a new head of the DEA who's into the gateway theory. I thought we'd moved past that. So we're kind of going backwards. I mean, if you remember, Biden was into the gateway theory as recently as 2017. But he switched his tune. People said, hey, wait, you don't say that anymore. It's like not cool thing to say. People had to peep in his ear saying, no, don't say that. But the good thing about Biden, he listened. He just, okay, my bad. And he just switched his tune, which is good, So, but, Trump's not going to switch any tune. He's going to stick to everything, till he's in the grave.
Biden was like that. Biden's like that grandpa that would say, prejudice stuff and then get corrected by his grandkids and doesn't say it anymore. Trump's the grandpa that just don't give a shit.
And also now that he's kind of in his last term, though, he's even hinting that there might be room for a third term. Trump, he's just doing anything he wants.
I have a feeling his third term will be in the same kind of box that the Lenin is in right now.
Well,
I'm just saying, but yeah, it bothers me that so many things have been skewed out of the sake of profit. Like, for instance, I see a lot of edibles out there that are just THC isolate, and I'm a person who believes that you can't just have isolate, you can't just have THC. All the CBDs, all the terpenes, they all have to be there for it to work the way it's supposed to work. Yeah, I see. Oh, I saw a new brand the other day, White Boy Rick gummies. It came out of Michigan, and they're just strictly 200 milligrams of isolate in a
Gary,
gummy.
In an adult use market, a variety of products, including isolate, which for a certain type of person and seeking a certain type of high, makes sense. But like in a medical only market like Florida, absolutely, I'm 100% there with you. Like full spectrum, entourage effects, cannabis is vital to sick people seeking relief. Now, if it's an adult use market and you just want to get stoned off your ass in a field somewhere, sure, I think isolate products make sense. But you're right, it in the sense that in a medicinal market, you shouldn't be selling isolate like it's a medical tool.
Gummies don't get my high. I mean, I like to add that to my THC content, and just for the taste. But if I just ate gummies for the day, I wouldn't get high.
Yeah.
unless I ate a whole bag of them, maybe.
How do you get high?
No, I'm just saying, with just smoking like normal. But I'm just saying, I don't get high from vaping.
Oh yeah.
Basically, vape carts don't do anything for me. Gummies don't do anything for me. I mean, I like the taste, but if I just did that separate and didn't smoke, I wouldn't be high.
Uh-huh.
In my opinion, it just doesn't have the effect for me, and I don't even know why people, take it to think they're getting high from it. I don't think you do, and I don't even think you get high from vaping.
Well, let's talk about another entourage effect. If I had a choice between a cup of coffee and a couple of Vivarin, I would prefer the cup of coffee. I actually like the feeling of the kind of energy I get from coffee as opposed to just caffeine pills, which just make me nervous and jittery, and I start barking at the dogs, that kind of situation.
Steve, I gotta ask, man. For millennials like Carlos and myself, we always have like a bucket list of people we would smoke with, right? But you've been a part of cannabis history, in the modern era. So rather than ask you who's your bucket list of people you want to smoke with, why don't you share with us, like, who are the top 5 celebrities that you've had the opportunity to smoke with that millennials like ourselves might even put on our bucket list?
Well, Willie Nelson is top of the list. Willie being 91. The thing with Willie is that, it took me years, although, we had the connection with him in High Times. Back in those days, Willie's career was not what it is now. He was dealing with IRS issues and stuff like that. And he wasn't, hailed like he is today. And he was a little hard to get to. But then he came out of the closet for hemp and started to do some work in that area. And we kind of tracked him down and kind of found him. But it was years later that I got on his bus. Talk about bucket list. I mean, I had to wait years. Many times I waited outside his bus in New York, but it was too crowded or this or that, or some reason. He would come outside and say hello to people. Didn't get on the damn bus. I was in Austin one time. There was an event, did not get on the bus. Too many celebrities or whatever. And finally one day with Chris Goldstein, NORML representative from up here in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, we went down to Atlantic City and did an interview with him on the bus. So that was done. That's accomplished. Check that off.
Nice.
And haven't seen Willie since. That was 2014. He's a little less accessible these days.
Sure.
And say Snoop Dogg, to say the least. I mean, Snoop was on the cover. We tracked him down. It took several years to get him too. A lot of these were, efforts to get them because Snoop had his issues in the 90s with court cases and one thing and the other, death row. They were kind of hard to deal with. But then through when he was in the Wash, we had a connection through New Line Cinema that helped bring him to New York to one of our award shows. And we were able to kind of like connect with him then. And we did a great interview with him around that time. And that's a funny session where 5 hours later into the photo shoot, I had to wake Snoop up on the couch asleep. I'm not kidding. Snoop, time to go. He was like the last one there without even an entourage.
That's awesome.
Just asleep on the couch. Tommy Chong, I love Tommy Chong dearly. I've been trying to find out a little bit more about what's happened with him lately because he lives in Pacific Palisades. Now, his house did not get burned down, thank goodness. I guess he was out of range of the fires for some reason, but I have not been able to really find out what happened. I've sent a couple of notes to him and his son, can you fill me in? The main thing I learned from his son, Paris, was they were safe around the time of the fires breaking out. But then I've gotten no other news. Cheech also lives in an area, lives in Malibu. His house was safe too. So that's 3. You want 2 more?
Hey, you've hit my bucket list already. Like, man,
out of curiosity, you mentioned Hunter Thompson earlier. Did you get to meet him when he was alive?
I didn't meet him directly. 2 things with him. One, he came to New York for an event, which I went to, and I saw him stumbling around doing his thing. And then, but my famous incident with him is, connection with him was at High Times. I was also, focusing on movies, stoner movies, and they did we really started to kind of zero in on that topic. I decided to do a poll of, famous people, sending their list of their top 25 druggy stoner movies of all time. And we had Hunter Thompson's address. So I just sent them the form with a note saying, "Can you please fill this out?" or whatever with my card. And lo and behold, I got a phone call from Hunter S. Thompson to the office at High Times.
Nice.
The phone rang, and it was Hunter on the phone calling and saying, "Oh, what's this thing all about?" kind of thing. And going over the list of, like which movie and he had kind of an odd list, but so that was my connection. I did have a phone call. I had a phone call with Tom Robbins at High Times once too, and I was editing a story he wrote, and he called me back. Oh my God!
So one rap group that I'm just absolutely obsessed with is Cypress Hill.
Right.
And if you're familiar with Cypress Hill at all, you should understand that none of their songs really are radio friendly. And at that time, that's what you needed to become a popular rap group. You needed a song that could get on the radio. And the truth is, High Times is really pretty much responsible for that group becoming popular, right? Can you speak on anything with Cypress Hill?
Yeah. I could talk about Cypress Hill for the rest of the show if you want. I love those guys. It's an important moment, for us at High Times, and I think for the legalization effort was when Cypress Hill walked in the door, so to speak, because they were the first hip hop group to really address this issue in any major way. Prior to them, a few songs here and there with mentions of weed, but nobody was active about it. Nobody was trying to change the laws. They just might, mention it here and there, tone low, like Chiba Chiba, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then comes Cypress Hill, in 91, with their first album, Stoned is the Way of the Walk, and things like that, Light Another. So they kind of set a tone. And also, we're in a NORML group here, and they were affiliated with National NORML. They had the title spokes group for NORML for a minute, maybe, I don't know if they did anything, but they did a press release and they were involved for a minute. And for High Times, to me, it was basically, as the music editor there at the time, I would just get phone calls or I would get packages in the mail proposing a group to appear in the magazine. But it was still fairly new to get the bands in the magazine. Prior to me, yes, groups were featured in High Times, but not in a big way. It was very sporadic. And so, coming in the 90s was a sort of a great music era. All kinds of different styles of music were all happening at once. And so many of those genres were into weed. The artists, whether it's, indie rock or metal, grunge, hip hop, reggae. There was just so many different avenues that connect in to, bring them into, to sort of the weed movement in some way, shape, or form. And Cypress Hill was basically the first. I heard from the record company. The record company, said, "Hey, we got a band for you." I listened to the music, liked it. I went to see them perform at the Apollo Theater in New York. They were 5th on the bill that night. Bunch of New York acts, and then Cypress Hill. They were a little ticked that night for being on 5th on the bill. And then a few days later, they were still in New York. We did a photo shoot, and when that issue came out, March of '92, nobody really knew Cypress Hill yet. It was a very popular issue. It was a great cover, a great design. And by the way, it was an early photo shoot, like a 9 a.m., which never have early photo shoots, especially for High Times. But I was just getting into doing photo shoots. The photographer could only do it 9 in the morning. Cypress Hill was there at 9 a.m. They were so excited to do a High Times photo shoot. So that came out great, but it just opened the door. From that point on, High Times featured hip hop artists regularly in the magazine and on the cover. Redman followed, Wu-Tang, Ice Cube, The Game. Over the years, a lot of hip hop coverage, and it really built a bridge, because if back then, the movement was pretty white and male, and there really weren't too many black people involved. And the hip hop bridge was really key to expanding the movement, expanding the number of people who are involved. And so that really opened a huge door. So over the years, Cypress continued, I'm on the second album, the album Black Sunday. My voice is on the album.
No way.
Sampled. I'm on the Legalize It track. Marijuana is a hemp plant that's used for many other things than just smoking. You've probably heard that line before on that album. And pot, herb, marijuana. So back when that happened, when they were putting together that album, Muggs, I got a message that Muggs was looking for audio of people talking about marijuana at events or rallies or something like that. And I had just been on a panel discussion with B Real at the New Music Seminar in New York, and the panel devolved into a discussion about marijuana. And that devolved, but it just went in another direction because that's not really the focus. But B Real was on the panel, and so was I, and it just suddenly it became like a weed panel. And so a lot of cool stuff on that panel. And then I asked for a copy of that tape, and they sent me one. And I had that before I got the request from Muggs, and then Muggs asked for it. So I gave Muggs that and some audio of like Gatewood Galbraith and a few other people talking. And he took all that stuff and merged it into legalize it. Pot or marijuana. Marijuana is a hemp plant. It's used for many other things than just smoking.
Wow.
That's my claim to fame on that album. And I also wrote the liner notes, which was 19 things about hemp. So, you know, deeply connected to Cypress Hill from that album. And
Steve, I already thought you were really cool, but now you're probably the coolest guy ever.
I tell people this every so often. The thing was, I don't know, did anybody watch the Cypress Hill documentary on Showtime 2 years ago?
I did.
I'm in it.
Oh shit, really? I missed you.
Gosh, I guess I didn't make a big impact on you, Carlos. You know, no, I had a nice moment in there. You know, I talk about how they pushed the envelope, that they would go on stage with these big joints in the middle of the country and places like Kansas or whatever, and didn't give a shit. You know, they were just going to do it and never got arrested doing it. You know, wow, amazingly, never had the police come and shut down a show because they were smoking out this place with a spliff yay big. You know, and to this day, you know, B Real lights went up like that every time on the stage. They're very respectful. They're very respectful to the people who came before them. They loved Jack Herer. They met Jack. Jack was a reason why they got involved, because Jack was in LA at the time. The Cypress was an LA group, and Jack was setting up like a booth on the beach at Venice over those years, and everybody would run into Jack on the booth on the beach there and learn about his Emperor Wears No Clothes book and his whole theories about hemp. And they loved Jack as, you know, like a local guy who they kind of got to know. Cheech and Chong, they really related to because of, you know, the Latin side of the equation of Cheech and Chong. So they always were very respectful. And now look what B Real's gone on to do. I mean, all the guys are doing good stuff, but then B Real's become like, you know, a leader in the business side of the movement in California with 7 or 8 Dr. Greenthrum stores, you know, all over California and one in Michigan. It's amazing. I mean, his story is fabulous. Because here's a guy who was a gangbanger who got shot and almost died and survived and had a long, huge, amazing career as a hip hop artist, and now, you know, as an entrepreneur. What a story!
Yeah.
And you mentioned Jack Herer just now, and that's something.
Herer.
Apparently, I said that to his son, and it upset him. But no, you one thing that High Times has did, not only promoting like cannabis and music, but really promoting cannabis activists. And you mentioned Jack Herer. What other activist? Herer. Sorry,
Herer like terror.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know. Most people call him Herer.
Yeah. But I mean, here's the thing: is like High Times really promoted a lot of the activists. Are there any activists that really stood out other than Jack?
Oh yes, so many. I mean, like I just mentioned, Gatewood Galbraith in Kentucky ran for mayor in Kentucky on a hemp platform. People like Ethan Nadelman, who, you know, ran the Drug Policy Alliance for years. He's a great activist. All the people at NORML over the years, currently and past. Ed Rosenthal, people like him, you know, the guru of ganja. All the yippies, you know, who you know helped found the legalization movement and started the New York City Cannabis Parade, which is still active 52 years later. Those people include Dana Beal, Aaron Kay. So Tom Prasad, the founder of High Times, you know, I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, being an activist and a journalist at the same time, you know, Tom kind of created that idea that was okay. You know, he was a smuggler. He took his smuggling money and founded High Times. You know, what other magazine could say that?
Yeah.
Well, Freedom Leaf, I think I saw a lot of very good activist articles in that while I was still in its heyday. I'm not certain what happened to that.
Hey, thanks for bringing that up. You know, it was I had 5 years of Freedom Leaf. It was a good bridge for me post High Times. I left High Times in 2007. I created Celeb Stoner. So I was one of the first, cannabis websites out there, and did that for 4, 5, 6 years. And then I got the opportunity, to work at Freedom Leaf and go back into magazine work. And if you remember, Freedom Leaf was the small version of a magazine, not a nice larger size. And I did 35 issues there. But they kind of they couldn't really make enough money to stay in business. They started with the idea of being a media company and also helping represent NORML and bring some money into NORML through product sales or things like that. And that didn't really work out too well. And they didn't really understand how to make money as a media company because they didn't really have much of a background in that. I was really the only media person there, who knew that much about it, though I'm not a business side guy to really lead them in that direction. But I mean, we operated without an ad director, so things like that. So you're not going to really make much money if you don't have an ad director bringing in ad revenues and stuff like that. And there was no sales, newsstand sales for the magazine. So there was just no money coming in. So they switched over to CBD. The CBD boom was starting to happen in, the 2016, 2017, 2018, around that time. So they started to buy up some CBD properties and made a deal with a company in Spain to buy some land in Spain. And that deal fell through and they lost a lot of money on that deal. I mean, $400,000 or $500,000 was a bad deal. And the guy who was running the company, then that kind of killed him, he was gone after that. And then they sold the company to a CBD company in Texas, and they kept it alive for a little while. Then that company went bankrupt. So it was a bankruptcy. But the sad thing about it was, it's kind of the typical scam of being sold a bill of goods, the stock stuff that a lot of these hustlers do. They give you stock and they, promise you a lot of things, and then the stock doesn't go anywhere. And I mean, I left that company at 280,000 shares, which meant absolutely nothing because it was valueless. But, the talk was, oh, well, all you have to do is get to 5, 10, 15 cents and you'll make some money. But I didn't make anything.
We call that getting Zuckerberg in the modern era.
Yeah, exactly. It was that kind of thing. I mean, I didn't fall for it, even though the boss there was saying, we'll be on a beach and blah, blah, blah. I didn't buy that. I don't care about that stuff. I don't want to be on a beach somewhere and just rich living it up. That was not my goal, but a little money, for my future would be a goal. So I could put a couple bucks away as I get older. But yeah, I mean, it was just a hustle, but the opportunity was good for me to do the magazine, and it kind of kept me viable in my post High Times years when people didn't quite know the work I did at High Times as the newer people coming in. And so I needed kind of a bridge, and Freedom Leaf provided that for me.
And High Times also did the same thing with Hemp Times, where they basically shifted over for a while. And I think that the CBD industry, it reimagined a lot of entrepreneurial possibilities, like for Carlos, who basically, he can always tell you, always wants to just basically sell cannabis like everybody else does, in the legacy market. But you had to get in on the CBD level, and he continues to evolve his shop from there as regulations change. And hopefully we can get rescheduling done or descheduling done so he can continue along those paths. But the CBD, that was a doorway for those people who went all in on CBD and hemp. A lot of them got burned.
Hey, since we're talking CBD and hemp, give me your take on the hemp-derived industry. I'm not in favor of it, generally speaking. I know it was a big issue in Florida during the election. A lot of the hemp-derived people being opposed to, the initiative and taking DeSantis' side. Where do you guys stand on that?
You probably get 3 different answers from us, Steve. But let's go to Carlos, since he's the one who that's his livelihood is being in that industry.
I mean, I don't want to be lumped in with the no on 3 people. I feel that the hemp side of things can be done responsibly, and I think that both sides can coexist. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem that way.
I mean, we're looking for a 2-state solution here, right?
Yeah, quite honestly, like I hear rumblings in our movement that the organization that was pushing to keep things the way, keep things right for small retailers like me, is no longer representing our best interests anymore. You know, they're actually opposed to THC derivatives now.
Shocker when you have the former head of the Republican Party as your lobbyist. That's all.
I mean, I heard that the former head of that organization is now former, you know, that eventually money gets into everything and corrupts. And that's what happened with Florida Healthy Alternatives. And that very well could be the issue, is that, you know, I'm sitting here in one of my two stores, you know, where we've purposely somewhat kept it small. You know, we haven't, you know, my company is not the type of company where we've gone out seeking investments and did some greedy cash grabs. But unfortunately, there's other people in this industry that do shit like that and fuck it up for the rest of us.
Yeah, the Adam Behrmans of the world are always going to be our downfall.
Yeah.
When you take ultimate profit over patients and over your consumers, eventually it's going to fall. I guess one of the biggest problems we have in regards to the derivatives and things of that sort, it's an effort for people who don't have the patience to wait until they're dead for progress to actually occur. For those of us who have been waiting since 1937 or so to have the market re-legalized, or even 1971, where it specifically said in the Schaefer report that the Attorney General legalize it if at any time and take it off the schedule. And yet we wait and we wait and we wait. 40 years in Congress of bills being posted every year, and they never get to committee. Nowadays, we get somewhat 20, 30 bills a year, and only one or two get to committee. And so people, they're tired of waiting. And that is why this derivative market was invented, to circumvent the progress, the organic progress of this legalization effort to finally be occurred, because who wants to wait for 10, 20, 30, 40 years?
What are they waiting for?
In the 1980s, when I was a major smoker over at Michigan State University, I said, legalization of cannabis is never going to happen. But here it is 40 years later, because I wasn't just sitting there waiting day by day and just utilizing the legacy market. It actually happened.
What are they waiting? What are they waiting for? What are they waiting for? Cannabis sodas?
I was sitting through a bill hearing in Maryland last week, and that topic actually came up, Steve. Cannabis sodas, and this issue of the hemp derived market and hemp derived cannabinoids. You know, they're basically in Maryland. You know, a shop like Carlos's is essentially illegal. You know, and then the vast majority of tobacco shops that are selling hemp derived products, you know, they're breaking the law. But there's not money to shut down every single shop. They don't have something like the way the Commissioner of Ag does in Florida with their regulations, and so they're trying to make it to where you can only buy hemp products from the licensed medical marijuana, adult use marijuana industry folks. And we know that industry has, you know, at least in Florida, been labeled as very corrupt because of the political corruption and the limited number of folks. It's not a free market. It's not something that doesn't have barriers to entry. And so, you know, they were debating multiple bills last week in Maryland around, you know, the hemp derived market and enforcement. They were debating a bill around special events. And in special events, they're trying to make it to where you can't smoke at special events, but you can have cannabis sodas and cannabis edibles. And it's just ludicrous, the hoops that politicians are jumping through. And so it's ironic, like I said before, is that you could have the same political fights in red Florida that you're having in blue Maryland. And it doesn't matter what political party these folks are affiliated with. They're both full of shit, and they're both not getting it right when it comes to legalization. Because for me, it should be the consumer that's put at the forefront. You know, it like the hemp derived market to me could exist, should exist, if you have folks like Carlos who do it right, who care about where they source it, who get stuff that's laboratory tested, who gets it from labs that haven't been bought out or corrupt. But even in Florida, we see that even the labs will give the medical marijuana industry, like certain players, True Booth and such, results that make it look flashy when those results aren't even accurate. And so that's a major concern that I have, is that consumers are the ones who suffer in all these political fights and all the corruption that we see.
And let's not forget that the K2 and the spice era was also another misstep of people not wanting to be patient for the organic development of the industry. And that is unfortunate. But and also the the delta tocopherol, when they started putting the thickeners to make the vape cartridges that were thicker, so that you couldn't be confused with the actual good stuff. That's all people trying to shortcut the system.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's sort of something that, I saw at High Times. If you remember the old days at High Times, there were these advertisements for what we called their fake pot. This nonsense that was sold through some companies, International Oddities, and a few other companies sold this stuff that kind of looked like weed and looked like hash, but wasn't even close. And one day they sent that stuff to the office, or one of the advertisers, because we didn't know. We knew it wasn't real, but we still didn't know how bad it was until we saw it in the office. It was disgusting. It's like, and we kind of ran to the publisher and said, what the fuck are we doing advertising this stuff? But, the High Times needed the money. So, so I do think there's a line between that fake pot stuff that was being sold back then and K2 spice and even CBD and now hemp derived. They're all kind of as a line, because of, prohibition in different parts of the country. Like hemp derived is very popular in prohibited states. I have a cousin who lives in Nebraska. They buy it in gas stations all over the place. They can't get anything else except for, underground, weed that's coming from wherever. But it's a tough market in those, prohibited states. So that's why they sneak in the door in those places and they succeed. So they kind of always take advantage of gullible, smokers, who will try anything, especially if the price is right.
Well, and that was something that came up in the bill hearing I heard last week was, the Maryland cannabis enforcement person was saying around, it's not even really the head shops or the tobacco stores that are selling, hemp derived products. The fact that you can get a Snoop Dogg branded, thing in the mail over the internet or Cheech and Chong gummies,
they're all doing it.
Yeah, it's also
we're all doing it. I looked at Houseplant, Seth Rogen's company, and he's got a whole new line of drinks, and they're all hemp derived because the only way they could sell it through the mail or whatever, if that's what they're planning to do, sell it, buy a carton in the mail or whatever, you can't buy it otherwise if it's not hemp derived. So that's the loophole, and goody for those who are succeeding with that, but I just don't. That's not why I tried to legalize it.
Well, let's talk about the legal path we're trying to go through right now. I think part of the problem, I hate to even say this, is that a presidency usually only goes for 4 years unless you're reelected. And government works so fucking slow that a bill that's introduced at the beginning of a legislature, of a new Congress, sometimes doesn't even make it until the end of that entire 4 years before it gets to the point where it can actually be signed into law. And that is what we had with this descheduling. It started in like 2022, and yet here it is 2024. And I was amazed that NORML was cut out of the hearings. And that in and of itself gave me a red flag saying there's something wrong with this process. And it happened to be with the fact that the DEA was working with our good friend Kevin Sabet and Smart Approaches to Marijuana, the guy who has always said cannabis will only be good as medicine if we can break it down to its individual molecules and just sell the molecules as medicine.
Spoken like a guy with Pfizer stock.
And possibly GW Pharmaceutical too, but we're not going to get into that, I don't think. But
Gary, like I said before, I've seen Paul Armentano make Kevin Sabet eat crow and hand him his ass in debates all around the country when it comes to cannabis. So it's not a shocker that he would collude with the DEA to make sure NORML was, not a part of the hearings. I mean, the last time NORML was part of, DEA hearings, you got the DEA judge ruled that cannabis has medicinal value, and the DEA just ignored their own administrative law judge, since 1988. So here we are.
Francis Young. Yeah.
So what exactly happened now? Where is the descheduling or rescheduling going? Is it officially dead right now, or is it just on pause?
It's delayed, that's for sure. Listen, they're going through everything now. Trump and his people as to what they want to push. And, and clearly, this is not a number one issue to him. He could have, I guess, now we know that you can, if you really want to try, they probably could do an executive order to legalize marijuana, or executive order to make it a schedule, whatever. He could have done all that stuff with his multitude of executive orders. Trump didn't do a thing. So, which indicative that he really doesn't care about this issue and never has. People who think he does, they're out of their minds. Now, the wild card is maybe Kennedy, and Musk a little bit in terms of their support of psychedelics. And I don't know where Kennedy stands on weed, but I'm sure it's, it was one of the things he did back in the day of all the drugs he did. So if Kennedy makes it, then there's maybe some opportunity for, him helping in that direction. If he's not there, I mean, the head of the DEA, like I said, now is a backwards kind of guy. So, we're just moving backwards clearly on every step of the way here. And so I don't see us moving forward under Trump.
Well, I've been going at it with, folks who are conservatives in the cannabis legalization movement, about this. And they're always saying those exact lines, Steve. Trump is going to do it, and he's in our best interest. And look, he's got Kennedy at this. And I'm like, he also put Pam Bondi, who we know very well in Florida, in charge of the Justice Department. And she's a former lobbyist for the largest private prison on the freaking planet. Like, that is, weed and Geo Group do not go together. You're never going to get that type of marriage to happen. And it's just shocking to see folks really just not pay attention to it. And folks who are politically adept at that. It's, some of us just willful ignorance, I guess.
Like, I should sound like a normal
Pam is not our friend. I can tell you for a fact. I wrote an article for Huffington Post some years ago, and I knocked her down. And then I went into a constitutional revision committee where I had a bill. It was a very simple one, just basically saying that in all laws, you have to use the word cannabis as opposed to marijuana so that we can make certain that it's codified properly. And she took my proposal and put it in the back of the stack. So I had to wait for 3 hours to get up to the microphone when practically everybody else was gone. And she kind of smirked at me as she was doing it. So I know basically where she stands. And for those good folks who are constantly telling us, well, Trump actually legalized cannabis with the Farm Bill. He didn't write the Farm Bill. I don't even think he even read the Farm Bill. I don't even think he looked at the cover of the Farm Bill other than just to sign it.
I should sound like a normal hemp guy and just be like, Trump legalized already. Hemp is marijuana.
Yeah, Steve, you got to see the people down here in Florida with that line. Carlos,
it really
share
is
more.
The worst, Steve, man. Okay, so I may be speaking a little preemptively right now, but I mean, I'm pretty sure we're going to see another hemp bill. All right. We already saw that stuff coming from Gruters. There's rumors that Burden's going to put her bill back out there. And there's all these rumors that the Florida Hemp Association has some bill that they're circulating around that is trying to get rid of THC. But I mean, we literally, apparently the deal was that the hemp industry would oppose the amendment to not see this hemp bill come back. And I mean, it seems like the hemp industry went against, the Amendment 3, basically said, I'm okay with tens of thousands of people going to jail every year, just to have 6 more months of being able to sell my stuff.
Well, they were certain that they paid for the veto with however many hundreds of thousands of dollars that they put into the DeSantis campaign. And he went ahead and vetoed that bill last year, which would have decimated the hemp industry, only to have it come back this year. We already know that Gruters put together a bill that was half, you're allowed two plants for home grow, provided that we can come over to your house and inspect it to make certain that there's no more than 2 plants, regardless of how many patients there are in the house, and to make certain you don't have a firearm, because if you have a firearm, you can't get a license to grow at home. This is the mindset of that bill, and the other half of it was again to decimate the hemp industry. And he pulled it the same day because he started getting a lot of flack from a number of different agencies to split it up into 2 bills. And that to me tells me that the House section of that hemp bill is coming. and the home grow bill may stand on its own, or it may disappear based on the number of overblown regulations that it has in it. But we'll wait and see.
So the last thing I want to say about this hemp is ask the question, what would Jack Harrow think? The hemp guy, what would he think of hemp-derived products? I have a question for you guys, which we haven't touched on issue 3 too much, and, hearing from you guys, I hear that there's a plan to, get another thing on the ballot for 2026. My theory right now is initiatives in red states are not going to win anymore. They're all going to fail. So why bother to waste the money on the effort? In other words, it's got to be done through legislation at this point. And why did it fail?
The last bill failed.
Fail? I mean, just basically from your point of view, I just want to hear you guys tell me. I have my theories. Why did it fail?
I would say, as a political organizer, there was no ground game. There was, the difference between the medical amendment and this one. Well, the consultants, like you said, this time they had red consultants. They had blue consultants on the medical campaign in Florida. But the one thing about blue consultants is they will put together a ground game no matter how small it is. And they spent $140 million, and I don't think they knocked on one door.
Yeah, they may have been afraid to do that
because of where it came from. I think Smart and Safe Florida was not able to effectively remove themselves from TrueLeaf. And there were so many biases that TrueLeaf was only doing it just for their own their own company gain.
Gary?
Yeah, a focus group went through and they saw the 2 basic reasons people did not vote for it. Number one, they didn't want a monopoly to be in charge of the recreational market in Florida, which would have been TrueLeaf and their MMTCs, and not allow anybody else to get into the industry. And the other part, which of course was false, but it was pushed as a true situation, was the fact that it didn't include home grow, which is kind of interesting because by Florida law, you can't have more than one topic on a bill, and they considered legalization and home grow to be 2 separate bills. So therefore it couldn't be in it, or it wouldn't have passed Supreme Court muster, or would never get on the ballot. Now, the new one that came out, very interesting. They put in a little statement saying, this bill does not prohibit the legislature from putting together a home grow initiative. Now, they're not prohibited now, but they had to put that in there so that people would say, oh, look, there's home grow in the bill. So maybe that means we can go ahead and vote for it now. The fact is, I see the Supreme Court as looking at that and saying, this is confusing to the voter because it makes the voter think that they're voting for home grow.
Well, Gary, there is one major concern I have about the new initiative, and it leans me towards encouraging us to not support it, which is ironic. And we may catch flack from National NORML about it, but it specifically bans smoking. And this is something going into our Constitution. That's something that's not going to be easily changed or deleted after the fact by the legislature. It's something that, like you said, it's going to take a constitutional revision commission, for us to fix that. And those happen once every 20 years. So, how are we ever going to have a cannabis festival if the Constitution of Florida says you can't smoke weed? That is the stupidest shit ever. And again, this goes back to these consultants that they're hiring, trying to make them jump through hoops of like Steve said, these red legislatures. And rather than let it happen organically through the legislative process, we're having to do it through direct democracy at the ballot because the political will and the testicular fortitude doesn't exist among the Florida legislature to get this right. And that's where we're at today.
And to answer your other question, Steve, now I forgot what I was going to say.
What was the question?
Well, I highly doubt that the legislator would legalize. Highly doubt that the Florida legislator will.
Yeah, well, I don't
know much of a choice
either.
You don't have much of a choice then, to go, whatever direction you can go there. But, again, I mean, the whole Trump factor there, I mean, the Trump supports it and it loses. So did DeSantis win?
It's a good question.
Yeah, if you want to score some political points, I'm sure he did. I mean, in the sense that not only did he score points against, I guess, dispensaries that didn't cut him a big enough check, but also the fact that he got hemp retailers to dump money into his legislative such funds, and he turned around and used that money to do things like ban Black history and try to delete any references to LGBTQ culture.
Now I remember what I was going to say. You were talking about Kennedy and Musk as a possible path, and
Right.
I see the price there as too high. I mean, I used to listen to RFK Jr. when he had that show on Air America called Ring of Fire, and where he was basically talking about environmental issues in regards to mercury and tuna and things of that sort. And he was semi-sane there. I guess the worm hadn't totally finished the job at that point in time in his brain, because he was making a lot of sense then. What he's saying now doesn't make any sense. His idea of getting rid of all vaccines, even though he claims he's not going to, under the advice of the people who prepped him for his hearings and things of that sort. But I think the price of having RFK Jr. in office is far too high, and the price of Musk getting his hands into things. Yesterday, he tried to take over the payment system, and claiming he wants to go ahead and ferret out any corruption of us giving money to terrorists. And for that, he wants to shut down the entire payment system for Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security.
Gary, if he wants to root out giving money to terrorists, he should stop donating to Nazis in Germany.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, he's an anti-Semite.
So I don't see those two guys as a path. I just don't see it happening.
I just consider Kennedy. I just considered Kennedy a wild card on these issues for that pertain to us. That's all.
Oh, I agree. He's definitely a wild card in a lot of aspects.
In a lot of ways, but just on the cannabis and psychedelic side of things, they constantly refer to psychedelics, not even cannabis, in discussions of what he favors. So.
Look, we were just talking about cannabis and this whole thing, but a lot of it has been psychedelics too. I mean, Carlos, do you remember in college? You remember going to USF? They were selling salvia at gas stations and head shops, in Tampa in the early 2000s.
Whatever happened to salvia?
Well, they made it illegal. But and then I remember in the 2010s, Damiana, they were selling, and then that was during that K2 movement.
Well, that's clearly bullshit. Damiana's not going to get you high, but salvia has a buzz.
Salvia made me feel like my soul left my body. So that was
salvia is awesome.
I smoked it one time up at High Times, and the whole room was like glowing and I don't know, like buzzing and vibrating. I don't know. It was a whole weird sensation I had. It was a little too weird to want to try it again.
Well, Steve, I just want to say you've documented and been a journalist for so long. Why does our government have such a fear over its citizens, delving into psychedelics? Is it because you come to conclusions that are anti-authoritarian, or is it really a public health crisis? Because I don't get it.
I actually think, I'm kind of surprised how receptive governments have been to psychedelics, to be honest, passing therapy laws and things like that and allowing its use. I'm kind of shocked, thanks to cannabis paving the way, because it's kind of the same approach, sort of medicalizing or making it therapeutic, and therefore it's more acceptable than just recreational use, which is questionable. So if you use it for medicine, it's okay, but if you use it just to have fun, maybe not okay. So I mean, it's the same approach. I guess I kind of laugh about it a little bit. I don't take it that seriously. I'm not really into the psychedelics movement. I don't want anybody arrested for it, but I don't really like the idea that it has to be therapeutic for people to utilize it.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of people just taking ketamine on their own and not.
That's different. That's different. But shrooms and whatever, other drugs that we've taken in the past on our own and go with the experiences. I don't think that's a negative way to experience psychedelics, where you just kind of figure it out yourself.
Kind of like the Timothy Learying of it. Yeah, nobody wants to be a Timothy Leary, basically, to experiment on yourself just to see how things are going. Although that.
So some people microdose and then don't get anything at all. So it's like from one side to like too much to too little. Find the middle ground, where you get something out of it.
I remember our time is getting short here. I know, Steve, I wanted to ask you a quick question. You're very much into the music industry. What greats have we lost this last year?
Oh gosh, offhand, I don't kind of have my list on me, but we did.
I know we got Garth Hudson right on the top of my list.
Oh, you mean this year? You're talking about already this year in 2025?
Well, this year is going pretty fast. But
I mean, just let me just take a quick look at like who we lost this year. I do have a little bit of a list here. Well, let's see. I mean,
you have a list of celebrities that died last year?
I do. I do have a list of that on Medium. I actually do keep a list of that, just to like a 70 and over list of like celebrities who are still alive at 95 or whatever. Like Gene Hackman just turned 95, thank goodness.
Oh, wow.
So I keep a track of that. But actually this year so far, I mean, Garth is the most famous person who's passed away this year. I mean, there's Brenton Wood, who's quite good, a soul singer, and Barry Goldberg with the Electric Flag. So, I mean, not any really major losses other than Garth so far. I call them, each time somebody passes, people just get so deeply into to when somebody passes, and certain people really meant a lot to everybody. You kind of see who matters more. I even notice these days, just even on the nightly news, they say so-and-so passed. They never would have years ago, but there's so many people from that generation passing now in their 70s and 80s that it's newsworthy, when somebody does, leave us. But yeah, I mean, I keep an eye on that, and it's sad to follow, but, as people age, it's going to happen.
Well, Steve, I could sit here and talk to you all day. I mean, this could be a 5-hour show, but I know none of us got the time. So one last question for me is, when it comes to stoner movies, right? What's the best genre in your opinion and the worst genre in your opinion for stoner movies?
Well, you mean genre? I mean, stoner movies is the genre. So rephrase the question.
Okay, well, like personally, I like stoner comedies, but I've seen a lot more on the streaming services that stoner horror is starting to become more of a thing. But oftentimes these horror movies seem comedic in nature, like Evil Bong, and such. I also saw one called Star Seed, where the guy goes into like the state or national park in Washington State, and turns out that this area is aliens are there, and the aliens are the ones that are protecting the weed plants.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, there is different genres within the stoner movie, so stoner comedies, druggy dramas, whatever you want to call them. Drug movies, evolved into stoner movies. But I mean, say An Easy Rider was considered like a drug movie back then because there were so many drugs in the movie, and they showed it, so explicitly. But there's a movie that came out this year in the horror genre called Trim Season. It's in my review of the top 30 stoner movies of 2024. It's a pretty ludicrous story about a couple of women who get jobs as trimmers in California, and you can imagine the craziness that can happen if you work for the wrong people. It's kind of like a Psycho sort of story with a huge crazy house, and they're in a dungeon trimming, and then all kinds of nutty stuff is going on with the woman who runs it and her sons who run around the place with guns, and it's just nutty. But I mean, yeah, they're out there. It was a good year for stoner movies per se, and particularly more women roles. I've been noticing in the last couple of years kind of a drop in stoner movies. Like post legalization, nobody has anything new to say. What do we say now that it's legal? And I've noticed in a few movies, they'll even say in the movie, there's one movie that I saw this year, it says somebody's being kind of hassled for weed, and they go, it's legal now. So that's popping up in the movies.
Show with Kathy Bates, I forget what it was called. That was awesome.
Lots of shroom scenes, lots of gummies, lots of edibles are very common in movies. The edibles are starting to kick in. That line is pretty popular these days in movies and TV shows. So it's following the trends. Stoner movies follow the trends, and now the trend is more women. All the years of Cheech and Chong and Harold and Kumar and and Big Lebowski dudes and all this kind of stuff. Now it's women wanting to get in on the action.
Yeah, I mean, Half Baked was what, 27 years ago?
Jesus, you're right. 2001? No, 1998.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You feel old, don't you, Carlos? You're like 27 years ago. I watched Half Baked on the couch yesterday.
Yeah, there's always that line between ludicrous and comedy kind of situation. Like I said, that TV show with Kathy Bates where she was head of some kind of dispensary in California.
Oh, Disjointed. It was a Netflix show.
Terrible show. I liked High Maintenance far better.
That High Maintenance was a lot better, but it was a little more odder. Let's just say, I mean, I kind of liked, Disjointed, for even with the laugh track and stuff like that, made fun of Steve D'Angelo. It just, they kind of had a certain smartness to it, but people didn't like it making fun of the dispensaries. And the guy in the basement, the ludicrous grower, and that kind of stuff. They just maybe went a little too far with parodying, the cannabis worker, consumer, whatever. Maybe took it a little too far, but I'm usually in favor of most programming around that, and I can work around it, especially with humor. I can find the laughs. I mean, people don't like Bill Maher so much these days, but I watched this special, and the guy is still funny, and that's all there is to it. Even Joe Rogan is funny. I mean, I don't like how Joe Rogan impacted the election with support of Trump, but that special he did recently was funny. I can divorce myself from your political opinions when you're just funny.
Yeah. And again, I blame the campaign consultants. Joe was a Bernie bro. And then he went Trump, and it's like, where did the Harris campaign miss out at?
Yeah, but I mean, Harris, she just kind of tried to, he demanded. I mean, as Joe Rogan gets to make demands of the vice president, she has to go 3 hours in Austin when she's a busy person to do a 3-hour show. Trump doesn't care. He had time for 3 hours, but she didn't. So maybe that's her, her fault in not making 3 hours for fucking Joe Rogan.
Wow.
I like
comedy. I mean, that would have got her elected. I don't think so. She might have won a couple of the Rogan people who were going to vote for Trump. Maybe they would have spun back to the Harris, but I don't think that was defining point in the election. There are a lot of other reasons why she lost, but I just didn't like the way Rogan pitched in. But he's just like everybody else. They're pitching in now because they want to be on his good side. Now, Rogan has nothing to gain by that. Rogan has nothing to gain by that. He's successful without Trump's help. He doesn't need Trump at all.
That is true.
Why does it have to be a 3-hour interview? Why couldn't she just come on for an hour?
I got an hour for you, and then do it do it online, do it through Zoom, do whatever. He had to be at his personal studio. Just like, it was way too demanding. I don't blame her. I don't blame her for too much of anything that went on. I think she was put in a very.
It kind of made me feel like he never had the intention of having her on.
Maybe not. But I mean,
let's go back to stoner movies though, because like I was thinking about this the other day, right? I'm sorry guys, but this is something that Disjointed is probably the best example, right? Disjointed I thought was a funny show. Like, I really didn't see anything wrong with it. I enjoyed the shit out of it. As a matter of fact, it was entertaining, right? But the truth is the parodies were a little bit too much, right? Is there some sort, and we had this one episode where it was Gary's friends from the lounges out in Vegas, where we were just kind of wondering, like, what is the best way to improve the movement? We need to show people that being successful and consuming marijuana at the same time. We need to tell the stories of the person that started smoking weed and that helped them become a doctor, right? Or become a lawyer or something like that. Does that exist anywhere? You seem to be pretty knowledgeable about.
No, I mean, certainly not in the comedy world, because they just want to make jokes. So something more serious, you might find that in a documentary. There was another show this year that came out. Jimmy Kimmel's company had that show called High Hopes. Anybody watch that on Hulu? That was a dispensary show.
Yeah, I saw that on Disney Plus. It was like a reality show for a dispensary.
Yeah, it was inside a dispensary. It was kind of like Disjointed, but reality, So it's like inside the store, had a couple of storylines about who worked there and blah, blah, blah. I watched one episode, but I didn't stick with it.
I mean, I love comedies. I mean, I watched the session for the comedy. Seriously, there was a lot of dark comedy in there. But my problem is, I love the comedy, but when we get to Tallahassee, when we get to DC, we got to be serious. And yet we have the legislators looking at us and they're saying, well, we don't want a Mr. Spicoli in our schools.
Right.
Or we don't want Cheech and Chong's coming in here and taking over businesses. They're taking the comedy and they're using it against us at that point in time so that we're not being taken seriously.
Well, I mean, the drug czar used the term Cheech and Chong science, I think it was Barry McCaffrey back in the day, So yeah, they've always kind of poked fun at that, but that's just Republican way of doing things. They're always going to find the popular way of putting something down. Something you like, well, maybe you shouldn't like it because of this or that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there are the stereotypes. I mean, people have said over the years that Cheech and Chong, set back the legalization movement by playing these stoner characters. And I've never bought that. I just basically think, we need to laugh about ourselves every once in a while. We can't take ourselves so darn seriously that we can't laugh. And that's kind of the whole idea of what I've been doing for so many years is like, yeah, I'm into the politics, but I also kind of want to lighten it up a little bit and make it a little fun. It's like you're at an event, make it entertaining, just not like a boring PowerPoint, where people are falling asleep. Entertain people a little bit because they're used to that. So utilize that. I think right now what you're seeing, you're getting away from the idea of that stoner movie concept of the two guys going on a crazy adventure. Now it's a little more, woven into the storyline, and it has a little more meaning and significance as opposed to just laughs. So You Hurt My Feelings, a movie with Louis Dreyfus in it. Her son works in a dispensary in New York. They have an issue around her working there. She thinks it's dangerous. The place gets ripped off while she's there one day. So it's woven in, and it's maybe even meaningful. They're trying to make kind of a point, like it's okay, but there's still some danger. Then that was playing off the idea of the illegal stores in New York now that are kind of somewhat going away, but the idea of, where is it safe to go buy cannabis? So it gets woven into the storylines, and I think, smartly in a lot of cases, and sometimes, done, for, more just clowny reasons, but I think that's kind of fading out. I think the clowny approach to stoner movies is kind of fading out now that we're in a legal environment.
Well, Steve, we really appreciate you, man.
I was a couple of years ago. I was at the National Policy Conference over in DC when it was still at the museum, and the guy from Roots magazine was there, and I asked him, why is it that the mainstream media is constantly utilizing these cannabis puns in their headlines and things of that sort, so that the movement again is not taken as seriously, because they're all saying, New policy is all smoke and mirrors,
up in smoke.
Exactly right. And we get this time and time again, and they couldn't really get a good answer for me as a journalist. But you were obviously in the High Times and Freedom Leaf and things of that sort, which were cannabis publications. But if you were, say, for instance, working for the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, and you had to come up with a headline, do you have to put a cannabis pun in there?
Maybe. Maybe, or something that links in. I mean, headlines are punny. That's the idea. Or alliterations or things like that. I love writing headlines. So, maybe you'll do it in the headline, but you won't do it in the rest of the story just to draw people in. That's okay. I can live with all that stuff too. I'm not that sensitive to every commentary. I'm more sensitive to like the longer articles in Atlantic and stuff like that impact people and people believe. I don't think, when they see something that's a joke or in a stoner movie, they're going to think is that serious that they have to kind of ponder it deeply. But when you read a long article, a 3,000 word, 5,000 word article that, takes cannabis to task, that concerns me. I don't really care about the puns so much. I care about the depth of the article and how it's impacting people, the readership. That bothers me more than anything else. But as far as, some of the movies, by the way, this year that I will recommend as we're coming around to the Oscars, A Real Pain has Kieran Culkin in it playing a stoner. And he's up for Best Supporting Actor, and he's won every award so far. So most likely he's going to win the Oscar for that. And so you're going to have a guy who smokes nonstop or smokes throughout the movie winning a supporting actor role as an Oscar. And that's not common. They generally don't give awards to people for smoking weed in movies.
I didn't know that. I'm going to check that movie out.
So basically him and his cousin go to Poland on a sort of a heritage tour, two Jewish guys. Their grandmother died recently. Want to see where she lived in Poland. Go to a concentration camp to kind of see what that was about, and basically work on their relationship as cousins. But one guy, he has a package. Culkin has a package delivered to the hotel in Poland with weed in it. And at the very first scene, Jesse Eisenberg's character, who's his cousin, goes, "I can't believe you're doing that." We're going to get busted in Poland or whatever. He's freaking out immediately and is sitting on the plane the whole time worried, they're going to get busted once they arrive at the hotel. Turns out the package is there and it's no problem. There's no issue. And they go up on the roof and smoke a joint.
That's awesome.
So that's fun. And the other one I was talking about with the where the character says it's legal now. That's a really good movie called His Three Daughters. That's on Netflix, and there's one of the three daughters plays the stoner, and there's three daughters, and one's older sister is kind of negative, and and one is more into it. So you've got Natasha Lyonne, who plays the stoner, and the two sisters, and deal with like the issues that we would deal with among families. Somebody's a stoner, somebody isn't, somebody's mad, you shouldn't go outside, do this, do that, kind of back of the line, go outside, not cool. Father's dying, smoke in the house. Oh my God, making a big issue out of nothing.
Yeah.
So how many of us have dealt with this all the time? I have. So those types of serious issues are popping up in the movies, and I kind of really recommend checking those out. And I also recommend the movie called Queer, with Daniel Craig playing William Burroughs' character in Mexico City in the 50s and 60s. And he goes down to Ecuador and does an ayahuasca trip in the third section of that movie, which I'd never seen an ayahuasca trip in a major movie. So there's things like that happening, So there's lots of things out there worth checking out. I really dig into this. I'm sort of the foremost expert on stoner movies, and I try to provide this information to people on a yearly basis or a regular basis. Like, here's movies worth going to see that have sort of a stony theme, flavor, counterculture, a little bit different than your typical mainstream movie. But I also look within the mainstream to find how marijuana is being projected. There you go. And how marijuana is being projected in the movies. I used to do an award show called The Stonies when I was at High Times, and we would give awards for the best portrayals of cannabis in movies, by the character, by the director, by whoever did the movie, who's telling a realistic story, not the BS that we often hear.
I highly recommend Celeb Stoner website for anybody who's into the culture. I think it is absolutely a fabulous resource.
Hey, thank you. And so the other thing before I check out today, I'd like to remind people to go to Patreon, the Celeb Stoner group at Patreon. Join that group if you can. It's free or paid with different tiers. I put out a newsletter every week. I'm proud of the newsletter. It's an adjunct to Celeb Stoner. So instead of just writing little articles about everything throughout the week, I just put everything into one newsletter, with some of the highlights from some of the things at Celeb Stoner, and some things you won't read at Celeb Stoner that are just at the newsletter. So I really recommend people going and signing up for the newsletter. It comes out, usually Tuesday or Wednesday every week. I've done over 400 of them over the last 4 or 5 years.
Man, I honestly, Steve, and I hope the other guys agree, but I would like to, you're a friend of the show. You come on quite often, but we gotta have you on just to talk about cannabis and popular culture.
Anytime, and also what I tend to do. I mean, I did it with Dan Vietz, who's one of your board members over at the National NORML. Dan's a movie buff, and so every year, we always do a wrap up on movies. He's got his sex, drugs, and civil liberties, radio show that he does out of Columbia, Missouri, and he has me on once a year. And we've sort of developed this kind of like, he likes to talk movies, so we'll do a wrap up of like, what are the best movies of the year? So we can do that too if you like, come next December.
Love it. Well, Carlos, I think that's a perfect segue for the NORML news. All right, so at the top of the news, we're going to start out with a longitudinal data that's been published in the International Journal of Drug Policy. Opening of cannabis retailers is not associated with a rise in marijuana-related department visits, according to a team of Canadian researchers that assessed the impact that cannabis store openings had on ER visits in 278 communities that they assessed in Ontario, Canada. So there were no changes in ER visits related to either alcohol use or opioids that were identified either, despite the anticipation that the introduction of licensed cannabis retailers might influence health outcomes. They found that there were no significant changes in ER visit rates following the allocation of retail licenses. So again, when we talk about we talk about the Reefer Madness and this whole issue about what about the kids, and you hear about it all the time. And I even heard it last week, a talking point from an anti-cannabis cannabis group. Oh, kids are going to the ER. The fact is that the data just isn't there. Okay, vast majority of people, be responsible cannabis consumers. Keep grandma's edibles away from the kids. But actually having cannabis retail establishments does not actually increase ER visits. I've read previous things around, car accidents and all the data points otherwise. So again, you can always visit NORML.org and check out and read these in more detail. Now, moving on to data that was published, a case report in the Brazilian Journal of Biology. This is coming out of Brazil. Cannabis oil provides symptomatic improvements in patients with Parkinson's disease. And so Brazilian investigators documented clinical improvements in a 77-year-old Parkinson's patient following his use of cannabis oil. The patient consumed up to 5 drops of cannabis oil twice daily for 3 months. And the study's authors reported symptomatic improvements within 1 week of cannabis therapy. The patient's symptoms continue to improve throughout the trial period, resulting in a reduction of his use of prescription medications. And so, just looking at these results continue to be promising, but then you also wonder why a lot of these studies are being squashed or not being done in the U.S. And then you think about the influence that Big Pharma has on a lot of these studies and such, and the different industries like the FDA, other agencies like Health and Human Services. So there's definitely more research to be done, but clearly cannabis is working and it helps. Moving on, this is a meta-analysis of a placebo-controlled study that was published in the Irish Journal of Medical Science coming out of Karachi, Pakistan. A team of Pakistani investigators reviewed data from 5 randomized clinical trials involving 176 participants. In 3 of the trials, subjects used either cannabis cigarettes or a placebo, and in 2 of the trials, subjects ingested either plant-derived extracts or a placebo. Researchers determined the analysis indicates that cannabis may be beneficial in inducing clinical remission. Specifically, individuals receiving cannabis treatment exhibited substantially higher rates of clinical remission at 8 weeks compared to those in the control group. The study's authors concluded the meta-analysis suggests cannabis can be used as a promising therapeutic option for managing Crohn's disease with minimal side effects, and the findings support its potential as an adjunct alternative therapy, especially for patients unresponsive to conventional treatments. So for those of you with Crohn's disease, obviously cannabis is beneficial. We're seeing this international research from all over the place. Also promising to see conservative leaning countries that have also certain prohibitions, if you will, on cannabis, also doing this research and seeing that it has value. So moving on from the medical news, let's move on to state level news and politics. All right. This one is probably the most disturbing and important for folks to realize. Coming out of the state of Ohio, Republican lawmaker Senator Stephen Huffman has introduced a bill to significantly amend the state's voter-approved adult-use marijuana legalization law. The lawmakers reporting that they're fast-tracking Senate Bill 56, which will make dozens of changes to Ohio's voter-approved initiative law. 57% of Ohioans voted for cannabis adult use legalization in 2023. The changes proposed by the bill include raising taxes on retail cannabis products, imposing new restrictions on home grow cultivation, setting arbitrary caps on the total number of retailers allowed, and providing new penalties for adults who share their cannabis with other consumers. This legislative effort marks the second time since the law was passed that Republican lawmakers have either sought to repeal or amend its provisions. In late 2023, the Ohio Senate GOP introduced a separate legislation to gut much of the law, and the plan was met with a resounding resistance from voters, pundits, members of House leadership. You can thank NORML for sharing an action alert, and within 72 hours, over 7,500 folks responded to the action alert. So again, when you see action alerts coming through your inbox or coming on the NORML website, click them, send that email to your lawmakers. It actually does make an impact. Okay. In 2024, the regulators implemented the law as written and approved by the voters, and adult marijuana sales began in August in the state of Ohio. So I think it's important because what we're seeing is the Florida model is trying to be exported to other red and purple states, and we know that just doesn't work. So let's move it on and let's talk about Florida. Well, right now, marijuana legalization in Florida via Smart and Safe Florida, which was behind Amendment 3 in 2024, is looking to put it on the 2026 ballot. And they didn't reach the 60% threshold. Only 56% of voters voted for it. You got to have 60% in Florida. Okay. And then looking at where it's going and what's the difference is, well, again, in Florida, possession remains a problem. 20 grams or more in Florida gets you a felony. 20 grams or less gets you a misdemeanor, and then it's punishable by up to 1 year in jail and up to $1,000 fine. Felony amounts can get you up to 5 years in prison. And I can tell you, Florida state prisons, they don't have a great reputation. All in all, this is a major concern with the new amendment, in my opinion, because it specifically, explicitly bans smoking. And this is not something that you want to put in the Constitution, because the Constitution is not easily changed. And so this current amendment, the way it's being written, the way it's being circulated, I right now cannot support it. And this is more as an organization we're going to have to take a vote on and discuss. You, the members, give your input. But I would say right now, give your input to Smart and Safe Florida. Send them messages. Go to their website. Send their emails. Tell them to retract that explicit smoking ban. They're trying to placate politicians who are never going to be in our favor to begin with. And we're going to probably see the 2026 measure, if it goes through as written, lose even more support than the 2024 measure. Also, moving on to some issues that we have in Florida right now, like as I was saying about action alerts, we need your help in Florida to fill out some NORML action alerts. Number one being around employment protections for patients. Gary and myself have worked very hard for the past 5 years to get a bill on employment protections for medical marijuana patients passed. We've had to water down the bill every single time to now it just protects public employees. And we're hoping that once you can have a government job and allows you to be a medical marijuana patient, the private sector may follow suit. But House Bill 83, Senate Bill 142 will prohibit most public employers from taking adverse personnel action against an employee or job applicant for their use of medical marijuana, as long as you're up to date with your medical marijuana card. You can produce that should you test positive or for peeing dirty, if you will. And right now, NORML has an action alert where you can send a letter. You click on it, go to your state legislator. Carlos, flash that across the screen. Drop the link in the chat. Make sure that you go ahead and fill out that action alert. Right now, we need to get another 20 folks today to fill that out so we can hit our goal of 50 to the local politicians in Florida, and making sure that they know what's happening. So click it, share it, and get it out there. Moving on, we're also trying to help you here in Florida with Suncoast NORML in supporting Senate Bill 146, which is a bill that Gary and myself put together and wrote after we had a show with Keith Stropp, the founder of NORML, a couple years ago, where he talked about the amazing work that they were doing in New York around protecting people's parental rights. And we thought that makes sense in Florida. People in Florida can, especially in custody hearings, when you look at investigations by CPS, that you can actually lose your kids or be considered a bad parent simply for being a legal medical marijuana patient. And Senate Bill 146 will prohibit the courts from denying or restricting certain parental rights based solely on a patient's status as a qualified medical marijuana patient, and will prohibit state officials from accusing parents of child endangerment based solely on your status as a qualified medical cannabis patient. We just need another 14 folks to fill that out. Send that action alert. We got a goal of 200 folks. So flash that link, Carlos. Drop it in the chat. Make sure folks fill that out and send that letter to your state senators to support this bill. Make sure that these bills get hearings. Gary and myself have been working on these bills for the better part of half a decade. And the fact is that these bills don't even get a bill hearing to come to light. Since the beginning of the 2020s, we've been working with the Florida legislature and our allies in the legislature to get these bills drafted, which is a freaking monumental task that shouldn't have to be. And that's why I said I lose my faith regardless of what party's in power, because, the Republicans don't want to hear it. The Democrats aren't even doing their part oftentimes to help get these things drafted. We actually have to elect NORML members and people that are allied with us to the legislature just to get these things written up and drafted, and then to get them a bill hearing and get through leadership is totally another task. And you might hear my 8-month-old son in the background. He's enjoying his cartoons while I read the news. So excuse any yelling. But I want to move on to local government now and talk about some important things. in the state of Maryland, something that NORML has had a direct hand in, the Annapolis City Council members have voted this week to end marijuana testing for public employees. That's right. Aldermen on the Annapolis City Council approved an ordinance that amends the city employment policy to abolish marijuana drug screening for most public employees. And it was Paul Armentano, the NORML's deputy director at National NORML, who testified in favor of the measure, who helped sway this. He's also testifying on another bill in Howard County, which will allow firefighters to be able to utilize cannabis and not be fired from their jobs. When you think about what our first responders have to go through, when you think about the fact that firefighters are the ones going through buildings, pulling out the burned bodies of children, seeing some of the most horrible things possible, and that they have no recourse to be able to medicate themselves after the fact, that they can be fired and lose their jobs and their pensions and their careers and futures, which they've sacrificed so much for us. Gary has actually drafted a bill that will help first responders be able to utilize this in the state of Florida. And so I think it's important to understand and celebrate when NORML gets these victories, that NORML still has relevancy in the modern era, that even though we legalize it, and even though there's a state like Maryland where adult use is legal and you can get cannabis products, just walk in, show your ID and get them over the counter, that people are still being fired from their jobs because of it. So I think that, again, as the cannabis consumer organization, we still have relevancy and we still need your help to support these things. Moving on to other local government questions, I think this is important because people look at Colorado as the mecca of legalization. They were the trailblazers. Well, in Colorado Springs, their city council is actually seeking to overturn the election outcome with a marijuana repeal question. Members of the Colorado City Council decided this week in a 7-2 vote to place a ballot question before the voters to overturn the outcome of a pair of marijuana initiatives that legalize adult use sales in the city of Colorado Springs. On election day, 54% of voters voted for ballot measure 300, which allows for the adult use of retail sale marijuana to take place within city limits of Colorado Springs. Voters also rejected a separate ballot measure which sought to explicitly ban such activities. Colorado Springs is the largest city in the state to prohibit the retail sales of adult use cannabis products. Now, I gotta say, I don't get it. It's not like the guys at the Air Force Academy are sitting on their ass chiefing all day, so it doesn't make any sense for Colorado Springs to be this hostile when it comes to cannabis, but it also doesn't make sense for politicians to try and thwart the will of the voters. And that is what we're seeing right now. And, as much as we talked today about the Trump effect and conservatives, there are still conservatives in this cannabis movement. And I would say, you guys got to make the connection between public policy and your elected folks. Don't let them get away with trampling on civil liberties because you happen to agree with them on these other issues. Like, civil liberties still matter. Civil rights still matter. And is regardless of how you feel about diversity, equity, and inclusion narratives, regardless how you feel about affirmative action, the fact is that it makes zero fucking sense. And I can say that because we're not FCC regulated. All right. That you're allowing these folks to trample on civil liberties, to reverse the will of the voters, all for the sake of some conservative utopia that is not going to happen in America. Okay. The fact is that, and Steve can tell you, as Gary can tell you, they lived through the Reagan years. Me and Carlos were just kids. They lived through the Nixon years. Every time we have this conservative domination of the U.S. government, it doesn't work out for folks with their civil rights and the civil liberties. People like to be free. We like to live in areas, where freedom abounds, and that is not what we're seeing. And we're also not seeing it from Democrats of being effective and being champions of that. Like I said, just this yesterday, the Democratic National Committee elected new leadership. They met here in D.C. to elect new party chairs. I do want to give a shout out to David Hogg, who's the youngest vice chair and the first member of Gen Z to run the Democratic Party, especially after surviving, the mass shooting that he had in his high school. And he's been an activist and such. But, you got the new party chair saying, oh, we're going to take money from the good billionaires. And look, the billionaire class does not give two flying fucks about us. The ironic part is the only time billionaires give a fuck about drug policy is when it matters that their kids get arrested. So that's probably the one thing you might see is that the Koch brothers and the Soros family don't want to see their grandkids going to jail for weed policy, because the street level cops don't know you're a fucking billionaire when you get pulled over for speeding in your Mazda smoking a joint or your Lamborghini or whatever the fuck that means. But all in all, this is the news. This is what's going on. And, we need your help to continue to do this great work that we do each and every day at Suncoast NORML, at National NORML. So if you subscribe to our email alerts, do that. If you want to become a member, do that. Because being a member of Suncoast NORML comes with some amazing fucking benefits. Number one being you get free general admission to our events. And we have our biggest event of the year that is coming up April 12th. Carlos, if you want to flash that on the screen, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, the best blunt in the Bay rolling competition. Number 4 is coming to you. We're coming in Tampa. Mark your calendars. It is we're going to have the defending champ there. We're going to have folks, rolling up. It is going to be amazing. You can go to suncoastnormal.org and get your tickets now. We have judge tickets available. Again, the judges actually get to smoke the entries. Carlos, you got to take down the graphics so folks can see the website.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Get judge tickets are limited. When they're sold out, they're sold out. But individual competitor and team entries are available. There's individual events and team events. Carlos, if you scroll down a little bit, there it is. The event guide. No, actually go back up. My bad. The event guide is there. We're going to have 3 individual. Go up. No, up. There you go. There's the event guide. We have 3 individual competitions. That's the endurance round, the speed round, and the style round. In the endurance round, you're gonna have to roll up at least 1 joint for every single judge. So that's gonna see how well your hands can make it. If you got arthritis, you might want to take some pills and smoke before you do that round. Then there's gonna speed round. How nice can you pearl that bad boy and who can roll the fastest? And then the style round, how creative you can be. For our team competitions this year, it's gonna be a lot of fun. We got a relay roll where essentially it's similar to the endurance round, but you're gonna have to pass it off to a teammate and roll one for each judge. There's the long burn roll where you're gonna have to see who can roll the best blunt and see whose blunt burns the longest. And then there's the hitch up round. That final round is based off. That's similar to the creative round for the individuals, but each person is going to have to be a part of rolling that joint. So, for example, if you're going to roll the cross joint, you're going to have to, one guy's going to have to, one member of the team will have to roll it, then the other one have to roll the cross part. So, all in all, we're going to have some great events. If you enter in as a team, you also get into the individual competitions. So get you and 3 other friends together, put a team of 4. You get discounts on your tickets, basically. The team entry is $100 for 4 people versus, the individual entry, which is $30 per individual contributor. Competitor. And then of course there's the judges tickets, which are the judges have the best part of the competition. They get to smoke the entries and grade them. If you're not someone who's good at rolling, if you just want to come see all the festivities, general admission is available for you. And again, if you become a Suncoast NORML member, you get free general admission. Also, we have a VIP available, so you can go ahead, skip the line. You get a 1-year membership to Suncoast NORML included with your VIP ticket. So if you're also Suncoast NORML member whose dues aren't up to date, get your VIP ticket, go ahead and come in. And again, all competitors and judges get a Suncoast NORML membership. This is our biggest fundraiser of the year. It is the granddaddy of them all when it comes to what we're doing with Suncoast NORML, and it's a fun event. It's going to be at the Dignitary Cafe in South Tampa off of West Shore. Again, all the details are on our website, so check it out. Now, we're looking at other events that are coming up. I think the most important one for folks as members and as cannabis consumers is lobby days in the state of Florida. Gary is our point person as public policy director, and he can tell you that we need you. There have been years where Gary has been solo just by himself, maybe 1 or 2 people come along, but we need a great showing. So we are teaming up with our partners at the Florida Cannabis Action Network. It's March 4th through March 6th in Tallahassee at the state capitol. This is Cannabis at the Capitol lobby days. This is the beginning of the legislative session where things are going to be kicking off. So you can go online, RSVP, let us know that you want to come, but also go to the Florida Cannabis Action Network. There's details on our website with all the great festivities. They have different events that are going to be set up each day, opportunities for you to network with fellow like-minded cannabis consumers, and a list of do's and don'ts because we have had people arrested at lobby days for doing stupid
stupid shit like forgetting they have their grinder packed full of weed in their purse when they go through the security screening at the front of the Capitol. Don't do shit like that. That will get you a criminal record for no damn reason. The last thing I think is important is we talk about being a member, being active. Suncoast NORML has its first membership meeting of the year. It is a digital meeting, so meet us wherever you are. You can join by your phone, you can join on the computer, but Thursday, February 20th, is our virtual general membership meeting. You don't even have to be an up-to-date member to join. This is open to the public, but we do want you to become a member. We want to update our members on everything going on. So again, Thursday, February 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Join us, RSVP. Make sure that you register for the Zoom link as well. There's a link there on our website so you can register and get access to Zoom and be able to join us. And with all of that, team, that's the NORML news.
Now, I want to say one of the bills that we got coming up this year, actually two of them, is, of course, the expansion of qualifying conditions, because there's so many things that are not included in those 10 qualifying conditions in the original medical bill. And that brings me to the point that our advocacy doesn't just stop at cannabis. Like, for instance, you'll notice this last week, and I mentioned it earlier, is that people with disabilities are being targeted as being DEI hires. And the fact is, most of the people who have medical problems are often considered disabled. And yet they are highly competent in their jobs. And yet they are going to discriminate you based on a disability, not on your ability to do the job. So we need to make certain that people who are disabled are not being considered illegal as far as being able to get employed or even getting minimum wage, because there's still a bill, believe it or not, from the Fair Labor Act of 1938 that says a person with disability, an employer can get a special certificate to pay them less than minimum wage. So even though they're competent in their job, they could get paid $2 or $3 an hour, and it happens constantly.
Yeah, I mean, so, Gary,
it's just that too.
You know, Gary, it's just disgusting to see the civil rights protections that have existed for so long in this country rolled back, but also, you know, the fact that we took for granted that civil rights protections in the workplace were by executive order under Lyndon Johnson, that neither Republicans nor Democrats since the 60s took the time to codify them in the law. You know, much in the same way since Roe versus Wade, neither Republicans nor Democrats took the time to codify, you know, access to and protections around reproductive rights in the law. Our elected officials in Congress continue to fail us. You know, we talked a little bit about today about descheduling and the powers of the executive branch around it, but Congress has fucking failed us time and time again to actually do anything. And it is sad to see that that's where we're at. You know, when they talk about DEI or they talk about critical race theory, what they really are saying is that we do not want an educated populace like millennials and like Generation Z around civil rights. We don't want those boomers who are continuing to be a part of the civil rights era passing on that fight for equality and justice to their kids and to their grandkids. We want to roll things back. We want to go back to the good old days when America was great during the 1950s. You know what made the 1950s so great? Union membership and a 90% tax on billionaires. You know, you really want to talk about how the American empire, if you will, how we got to that era in the 70s, you know, where you know, you could essentially graduate high school, you could marry someone and afford a house and raise 2 kids and possibly send them off to college, all without having to have a master's degree or PhD. All right. It's because we invested in ourselves in this country. And that is not what we have. What we have right now is divestment. What we see is the greatest transfer of wealth among the working and middle class in this country to people who have more money than they'll ever be able to spend in 10 lifetimes. All right. And the sad part about it is behind all of that, somehow because they smoke a joint on the Joe Rogan podcast or some other new media, that somehow they're relatable to us. You know, and that's just not true. You want to talk about people that are relatable, come see the guests that we have here on the rotation each and every week. People who have been in the trenches and who have been documenting cannabis culture and media for years. We have experts. We have folks that are pushing forward public policy when it comes to civil rights and cannabis. You know, all in all, you're not going to see us sitting here jockeying for the establishment support. You're not going to see us sucking up to folks And you can say what you want about my political affiliation or Gary's or Carlos's, but the fact is that the folks at NORML, at Suncoast NORML, our board members or volunteers, they all bust their asses each and every day to do what they can to make this work. And so we really appreciate the support. We appreciate all the folks in the comment section, even you trolls at times, because at least you're giving us some engagement. But I did see here that David Marsh said, will we consider having Abe Gray on the podcast, because he's the curator of the only cannabis museum in New Zealand, and they call him the Gandalf of cannabis in that country. Hey, Dave, send us an email, info@suncoastnormal.org. If you got contact info for Abe, by all means, connect them with us. We love to always add new guests to the show and highlight folks who are doing big things. But again, we want to make sure that you know the truth, that in an age of misinformation, disinformation, you're going to always be able to come to Suncoast NORML, and we'll give it to you raw, dirty, and gritty, and make sure that you know exactly what's going down. So, Carlos, you had a lot to say to Steve today, but what's your take on current affairs?
Because it's time for my medicine.
What's your take on current affairs, brother? How do you feel about kind of the news that I read today and different things that you've seen? I mean, fuck, we're 2 weeks into a new regime in this country, and planes are already falling out of the fucking sky.
I'm
right,
scared
guys.
shitless. I'm scared shitless.
Well, let's see how the next week comes by, and if we're still here, I'll be here next Sunday, guys.
All right. I think Gary's trying to give us the hint to end the show. Looks like he needs to go smoke bad.
It's like
Gary's like, my nerves are bad. It's been 2 hours. Shit.
All right, well, bye everybody.
Catch y'all next week in the rotation.
And support the disabled, guys.